This is Darling Nikki, and this week we are talking about gender roles. We have a lot of questions that we can choose to answer or not answer, so I've gone through our list and selected a few that I'll talk about today. So you might hear me talk about some that others don't talk about, or others talk about some that I don't talk about, so you get it. Alright, our first question that I think is an awesome question is, how important are gender roles? I'm sure a lot of people will say that they're not very important, but to me, gender roles are slightly important, and here's why. I'm a very feminine person, and that comes through in my relationships, and so I wouldn't necessarily be looking to be in a relationship with somebody who was as feminine as I am. Does that make sense? Does it mean that I'm looking to have a traditional 1950s household where I stay home and have no life and don't work and my husband provides for the family? No, not necessarily, but gender roles do somewhat matter. I wouldn't want to date somebody who is nearly as feminine as I am. And in the same regard, I wouldn't want to date somebody who's hyper-masculine either. Even when I have dated cisgendered guys, I've never been interested in guys that were overly masculine or hyper-masculine in any way. So I do think gender roles matter to an extent in terms of like who you're attracted to, but I don't think they necessarily matter like totally and completely, you know? Alright, one other thing about that I wanted to mention is that my interests, just because I'm very feminine, my interests don't necessarily totally reflect that. I mean, I am interested in some things that are not typical female, feminine things. I really like to learn about cars, and I know a bit about cars, so that's just an example of one way in which I kind of break the traditional gender stereotype. So, do trans men adopt a traditional masculine role when transitioning? I think a lot of times, yeah. I think for some period of time they will adopt a hyper-masculine role until they come into their selves, sort of, and then they might backtrack a little bit and back off the masculinity thing and really be themselves after that. But I think sometimes at first, yeah, guys will be hyper-masculine for a while. But, you know, I had a friend who started transitioning and he became like super, super masculine, and then about 4 months after being on T, he sort of backed off, and, you know, he's now, like, gay identified. So I think that does happen, and there's nothing wrong with that. I think at first, guys think they have to, like, reject everything feminine in order to be perceived as male, and then once they realize that's not the case, they might back off a little bit. And I'm sure the testosterone has something to do with that, too. Do transgendered guys reject their femininity? I think it would be ridiculous of me to generalize and say yes or no to all, because every single individual is so different. But no, not in my experiences, no. And that's just what the trans guys I've known. In my personal experiences, no, they do not reject their femininity totally. Many will reject their bodies. Some don't even do that, but many reject their bodies. But they don't necessarily reject all things feminine. Like I said, at least not in my experience. You know, trans guys I know still, you know, love Hello Kitty or other things that might be considered not very masculine. Is gender binary? Is sex binary? Before I answer that, I want to explain how I view the differences between sex and gender. For me, sex is basically what's going on with your chromosomes. XX, XY. Sex. Gender is a whole bigger concept. It's a whole other bag of tricks. Gender, I think, has to do, to put it blatantly, with, in our society, whether you're male or female. In other societies, there are, some have up to 5 different genders. But as far as sex goes, it's XX or XY, but gender, is a lot of things. So is gender binary, is sex binary? I think sex, I don't think either of them are binary, really, because if sex or gender were binary, then we wouldn't have people who are trans, and we wouldn't have people who are intersexed, etc. So no, I don't think either of them are binary. I think there's a spectrum for both, which is why we have people who are trans or intersexed and other conditions, etc. And like I said, in our society, I do think that we view both as being binary, but on the whole, I do not think that gender or sex are binary. And I wish that the Western culture would kind of get on board with that, because a lot of other cultures recognize that there is a third or even a fourth and fifth gender. So I wish that Western culture would kind of jump on board with that thought. But I think the reason why we don't is due to religion, actually. And I was watching a special on this yesterday, so it kind of put some more ideas in my head about this. But the idea is that because we are a Christian-based culture or a Christian-based society, we kind of use the Bible to say, no, man and woman, that's it. There's a man and woman. The Bible says man and woman. But obviously that's not the case, or else we wouldn't have so many people who don't fall into those two categories. Because every day people are born trans or intersex. So, I wish our society wasn't so based on the Christian ideals, or else we would be able to recognize that gender and sex are not binary. What does society deem as masculine, and does your partner fall into that? I think our society thinks of masculine as being a lot of things. For one, I think that our society thinks that people who are masculine or male should have a certain look, should have short hair, should dress a certain way. And in terms of interests, people who are masculine or male should be handy with cars, know how to fix cars, know things about computers, know things about working outdoors and things like that, and should provide for the family. And if you don't fall into some of those things, then your masculinity is put into question. And I think along with that, society also thinks that there should be sort of that 1950s ideal between a male and a female in a relationship. I don't think Gabe follows that or falls into that. We do definitely have somewhat traditional gender roles in our relationship, but when something's wrong with the car, do I ask Gabe to fix it? No. Things like that. So I think I've talked about this in another video. I feel like I'm having deja vu. I can't think of what video that would be, but I'm pretty sure I've talked about this. But anyways, I don't think he falls into traditional masculine roles. Okay, does he like video games? Yes, he's playing them right now. But does he play fighting games, shooting games, sports games? No, he plays cutesy games and Sims and stuff like that. So it all works out. It's all like a balance, and I don't think that he has completely fallen into being hyper masculine. There's a lot of talk about how when a guy starts transitioning, he will at first become like hyper masculine, and then his girlfriend might become hyper feminine to make him feel more masculine. I've heard that said, and we have actually been accused of having that kind of situation going on, and it's very much not like that. When we were together before he started transitioning, I was still hyper feminine. That's just who I am. I've never grown up around men. I grew up in a household with my mom and my sister, so there's 3 women in a household. I'm very feminine. I know how to cook. I always do my makeup, always do my hair. That's just who I am. So I was like that before he even started transitioning. And has he become more masculine? No, not really. He's still the same person that he's always been. He's always been sort of in between, sort of like androgynous, more masculine, but he still, likes some feminine things. So I don't think that he's falling into the traditional roles of what is expected of a male. But gender roles are very, very complex, and it varies from society to society too. I don't have a whole lot more I want to talk about with this. I kind of touched on everything that I wanted to talk about for today. But I am going to post a link to a video that I think goes along this topic. So I'll have that link over there. Check it out. And if you have any questions, please let me know. And you might have noticed we still have a couple more openings on the channel, so if you're interested, please send us a message. And I will see you all next week for another edition of Snappy Sundays with Darling Nikki.